Cybersecurity is just as important as ever before in the world of artificial intelligence, which is today's expert guest, Terry Ziemniak. Today's episode is brought to you by the bestseller ChatGPT Profits. This book is the missing instruction manual to get you up and running with ChatGPT in a matter of minutes. As a special gift, you can get it absolutely free at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift or at the link right below this episode. Make sure to grab your copy before it goes back up to full price. Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss, and start living your retirement dreams now, then you come to the right place. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast Show, where you will learn how to use artificial intelligence to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host. Now, a lot of people are so excited about new technologies that they never think about the risks. And we get really excited and think, oh, everything will figure itself out. And a lot of people have this mindset of OpenAI is going to figure it all out. They'll handle security. If I get in trouble, they'll cover me. And we've already seen that's not really the case. They do say they'll cover you if you get in trouble for like copyright infringement, if you accidentally write a blog post that's plagiarized, but that's the only thing they've talked about. We already saw a lawyer get censured last year for bad data. Why do you think people get so excited by technology and then the concern follows way far behind?
Morning, by the way, Jonathan. I appreciate you inviting me on your podcast. People are always looking after the what's new, the latest, the trendy thing, and AI is certainly all of those things. It's easier to see the value and the gold rush than the potential risks coming behind it. But it's interesting you mentioned early on, Jonathan, you were talking about AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI is going to protect us. Okay, they're going to build a security controls in, and the users can just run free willy over this thing, and the technology protect itself. I'll take you to an analogy. If you remember when the cloud technology got real popular 10 years ago, everyone's jumping on AWS, Google, Azure, and whatnot. They introduced a concept which I think applies here in the OpenAI space, and that concept is called a shared security model. So when you're in the Azure space and you're using the Azure managed database server, for example, Microsoft manages the power, the basic network stuff. They do patching. They do 3/4 of what you'd consider technical security space. They don't do it all. As the consumer of that solution, I take partial responsibility in security. So particular to that example of database being managed, as the consumer, I'm responsible for people. I'm responsible for the code on top of it. So in that giant stack of security, Microsoft does a good chunk of it for me, but I still own part of it. That same concept applies in the AI space. As these folks with these really great AI tools are evolving, they're going to start building more and more controls and protections, and they're going to get you half, 2/3, 80% of the way of where, we're expected to be from a security perspective. But as the owners and users of the technology, you are always going to have a responsibility. Right now, that responsibility is probably in the user access space. Can Jonathan run as administrator? Can Terry run as a user? Does Terry need a password? Does Terry need multi-factor? Those sorts of things. Also, today, we're dealing with the data governance concept. Should Terry be posting data up there? Can Terry send data this direction? I answer the idea that it's always going to be a shared security model, but be aware that you, as the owner and consumer of that technology, know your responsibilities and make sure you're accounting for those.
Let me give you another example that I'm thinking of. The big AIs are built by Google, they're built by OpenAI. OpenAI is 49% owned by Microsoft. Now, they say they don't keep your data. What do you think the odds are that's 100% true? Because Google's entire business model is built on putting ads in your email, reading your emails, basically getting with as much as they can. And Microsoft was founded, the very first version of MS-DOS was stolen code. It was built by another guy that was on a trip, so they took credit for it. So their foundation at a core level, right? The very first thing they ever did that started their company, MS-DOS, stolen code. What are the odds that they're going to go, you know what, we promise, because they say they promise not touching your data, they're not looking at it, that if a competitor who is building a product they're interested in uploads their data, they're not going to take a little peek under the skirt.
That's a tough one. I always say it falls in the realm of trust but verify. The big players like Microsoft, Google, and AWS, they've got regulators all over 'em, and there's contractual protections, and Amazon doesn't want to go bankrupt and they get dinged by Europe all the time. So trust but verify in the sense that if it's my personal vacation diary and I want to post it up, that's one thing. If it's my corporate intellectual property, you may be leery about it. So I think it's risk management as well of what you put up there. And the risk management really is a corporate concept more than a personal Jonathan concept. That it goes back to the responsibilities of the companies. The companies should be thinking through and set those governance models of, yeah, you can send, I don't know, new marketing information up to Chat GPT and do the whiz bang stuff it's going to do. But don't send up our financial records and don't set up business plans up there. There's always a risk and you got to protect yourself as a business. So it's, yeah, trust but verify would be my take on that.
That's what I wanted to get into next, which is that the government has levels of security, like secret, top secret, eyes only, and larger companies have that, right? Coke has the highest level is their secret recipe, right? Hidden in the vault. That's the highest recipe. Same thing KFC, right? We're not going to tell you the 11 herbs or spices are. We'll just tell you there's 11. That's their highest level of security. A lot of smaller companies, I think, don't have this idea of this is our secret sauce. This is our middle. This we really don't care. Separating it that way. And how would you advise when you come in because you're a cybersecurity expert, you come in as a fractional expert. If people don't have any policy, starting at that point, how do you say, here's how to divide into categories? And is 3 categories the right number or should it be 5? What's a good starting point?
Yeah. I tell you that that's a great point because when I work with small, mid-sized companies, almost all of them struggle with the most foundational part of cybersecurity, which is really what is your stuff? Your data, your people, employees, contractors, what are your contracts and your vendors and partnership? What are your devices? What are your networks? Just foundational to tracking all your stuff is difficult. You got to put effort to make it work, but it's just foundational for your cybersecurity. One particular aspect, especially with AI becoming so popular so quickly, is your data. Where is your data? What is your data? Generally, it's called data governance. And the idea being, to your point, you're going to classify your data. What's our secret sauce? What's really important and what's not that important? And then based on that, what are the expectations? Maybe it's medical records. It's governed by HIPAA and we must do think. Maybe it's credit card information and that has not regulations, but contractual protections. Maybe it's just employee information and has state law expectations, your personal identity theft. Maybe it's business plans with no outside regulations or expectations, but we got to protect our business stuff. Yeah, absolutely. You want to think through the process of identifying and classifying your data. 3 tiers is not a bad one. I actually go for my smaller clients, honestly, just 2 things we care about and things we don't really care about. And things you care about would be, again, regulatory. So your credit cards, your medical information, your consumer information, the stuff that you have expectations to protect. And what I do, Jonathan, I always make that a single tier because for small companies, it's hard to manage a really high level of expectation and then just a moderately high level of security expectation. So I just bump it all. So everything is going to be fully encrypted. The backups are the same. Encryption in transit is going to be the same. So honestly, I split it into 2 tiers. But that being said, it does take time to think through those tiers and you got to go find the stuff. So maybe we're worried about business data. Where is it? Is it on Jonathan's phone? Is it in Terry's personal Google Drive? Is it an email? Is it this place? Dropbox, backup tapes, all over the place. Identify the stuff and finding it. Those are really the foundational concept that make your overall cybersecurity program work and definitely required to manage this AI risk.
I think that's really good to first figure out, okay, what do I actually need to protect? Now I have a sense of it. A lot of companies say, I'm too small. A lot of small people go, I'm a 1-person operation. I'm a 3-person operation. Why would someone hack me? Why would someone attack me? Especially because it seems like computer viruses have disappeared. When I worked, my very first job was in IT way many years ago when I was 18 in the late 90s. And that was when the I love you virus came out. And you open that email No one like, I can't imagine anyone would open it now, but probably they still would, and we had one guy who did open it twice, which kinda blew my mind. I was like, "Nobody loves you. Just stop." But that was, like, what we were all worried about, and we would all have antivirus stuff on our computer, and then I switched to Mac, and everyone's like, "They don't write viruses for Mac." I was like, "Are you sure about that? I don't know." And you have, "Do I need a firewall or not?" And it was really the sense of personal attack, mostly the prankster style of attack, which was, "Let's see if we can crash a computer. Let's see if we can destroy someone's data." Now it's switched more there's a lot more of the hold your data for ransom version of that and attacking companies, and people have seen if I'm gonna why hack one individual, I can hack a company. And this is never more obvious to me than when people talk about website security. When I first started putting up barriers on my website, I thought, come on, I have a tiny blog. Who's going to attack it? And it goes, report. I had to turn off the reports because I was getting so many. It was like, attack. I recently had a major attack on one of my sub websites just because someone figured out the username. Even as a basic security precaution, like with a standard blog, they all give everyone the username admin or user. I always change it to randomized character. So it's two passwords. There was a mistake in the settings that you could see the username in the settings. So I went back in, had to set up a new username and set up 2FA. They're still attacking the old username, which means I found that security hole. So at least that, but all the time, like lockout for even a small site, not even my main site. It's a sub site that I'm transitioning away from, but I still don't want it to get hacked. There's a whole bunch of processes for website security that I've had to evolve. Like I take a backup once a week. I keep a series of backups. I have a second backup system. All of these elements are in place because we know that sites get attacked, but people say I'm too small. Why would anyone attack me? And what I see, the problem with AI is that it's a new vector that we haven't really thought about. There are a lot of AI companies, for example, that pretend they're an AI or they're just a front end for ChatGPT. So you don't know what you're putting between you and ChatGPT, not really, because they're just using ChatGPT's API and they don't have like a governance policy. They're not checking how to use the API, not really. So you might be running a man in the middle, pulling all the data, people on the way. We recently saw there was a Facebook page that pretended it was associated with a big AI company, and they put a virus on about 1,000,000 computers with this Facebook page that just came out in the news today. I think it was a fake Midjourney or fake ChatGPT page. It's happening very quickly. This new vector, it's new territory. There was new territory. People think of good ways to use it. A lot of people think of bad ways to use it. What are some basic ways that you tell your clients or you tell people, here's how to approach a new technology and here's some way to have a barriers? I'll give you my example first. When I talk to a client or someone talking about security, I say, here's how you can have a secure AI. You run it on a laptop that's air gapped. Set up a local AI. At the end of the day, you run a magnet over it and then you blow it up. That way, that's the most secure version because there's the AI is never connected to the internet, and then you destroy it at the end of the day. Nobody ever wants to do that. Nobody ever wants to destroy a laptop at the end of every day because that way you can't have someone break into your building or do a social engineering and steal the laptop because that would be a vulnerability. We've all seen the person who accidentally left secret material in the car and went to Starbucks and it got stolen. So nobody wants to do the highest level of security. So what is the right level on that spectrum between not paying attention to security and destroy your laptop every day security?
Yeah, Zinnercy used the phrase that this is the most secure model. And that's interesting because to me, it triggers the conversation of how security have to be. Nobody really needs to hit that highest level. Let's show the government or something. You may have really high requirements for cybersecurity. Most people don't need that level of security. So when I talk to my clients, I use the phrase, what's the right level of security for us? And then how do we get there? So particular to the use of AI technology, how secure do you have to be goes back to, we talked about data governance. If you're just putting marketing a website in the chat GPT, do it all day long. Nobody cares if it's data you're not worried about. If you're putting medical data up there, shame on you, you should be doing that. I mean, there's different ways to do it. So it's really based on, in this case, it's the data classification. So if it's data we care about, you got to consider the security within the generative tools that you're using. So yeah, I hate to keep saying it, but it really comes down to governance. You think through what data you're using, what are you trying to get out of it? The problem is, I think most small companies, I don't know that they A, ask the right questions, and B, really have necessarily the technical expertise to do anything beyond Chat GPT. So AI is percolating down in all these consumer level pieces of software, Copilot in Microsoft Office, for example. It's just built in now and you can license it, but away you go and you're using Chat GPT within Microsoft Office, which is great, a lot of value. But if Jonathan, the analyst, isn't thinking about it, and he's putting his financial stuff into Excel and hits the button, boom, all that stuff goes up to Chat GPT space. So I think I would suggest companies take a couple hours and have a session with the right folks to think about what are our rules around AI? Where can we use it? Where can we not use it? What's the data we're going to use? What are the risks we're worried about? A couple hour session, you can think through and manage this risk. Because this is a risk. This AI is similar to your cyber risk, your financial risk, your competitive risk. You're not really going to drive these down to zero. These are business level conversations you have to have. These are great tools and can do great things, but you got to manage the risk associated with it.
Let me ask about a different type of technical mistake. I'll give you an example. I recently posted a question on LinkedIn, which was if I post a tweet that's offensive, but then I say, hey, ChatGPT wrote it, I posted it without reading it, does that mean I'm not responsible anymore? 99% of the people said, no, it's still your fault. One person said, yeah, it's not your fault. And I was like, oh boy, that guy's gonna be trouble when he makes that mistake. It's the new version of the dog ate my homework, right? There's a lot of people are posting content while they're reading it, which I think is another form of risk. You can accidentally create content. This would happen to a lawyer who published a paper with content that he didn't double check. There's different versions of this, but we've also seen like a lot of celebrities will get in trouble for a tweet. I'm like, probably their friend or a VA is the one running their Twitter. It's probably not them. I have met a lot of people who don't realize that politicians don't write their own books. I've been ghostwriting for 10 years. I was like, you think someone running for president has time to write a 600-page book? Definitely someone else. That's an entire job. So sometimes we don't know about that, but it doesn't matter if someone in between did it because the person we blame gets the blame. So there's a possibility now, another security concern is publishing content that you say, oh, I have a superpower. I get really worried when people say I can replace myself because that means they're not doing oversight. That means, oh, this does the work and I trust it to output it. And we can see that in all of our social media feeds. But there's a lot of content that's the quality's dropped. That's why everyone talks so bad about the LinkedIn feed. It's so hard for me to find anything worth commenting on LinkedIn. And I try to be active for that reason. It's all AI generated content. What is some ways that people should start thinking about the content they're generating and the risk that could cause? There was recently a company in England that let their chatbot, they had to turn it off because the chatbot was like, yeah, we're the worst company in England. Like the chatbot turned against them when it was talking to a customer. And that's another thing. Whenever you take your eyes off an AI, just like when you take your eyes off an employee, right? If you just go, oh, you're my employee, but I'll never check your work, what's going to happen? So how should people approach that part of security, that part of making a mistake that can also damage your brand or company in a major way?
Yeah. That goes back to my previous answer. It's a risk consideration. So if you have a new use for AI, we're going to start spitting out the social media content. Okay. Viable solution to a business problem. We can drive costs down. We can have all sorts of neat things here. What's the risk behind using AI to automatically generate our social media stuff? The risk is it could go south and make inappropriate comments, whatever it may be. That's a risk. How are we going to manage that risk? Whatever the solution may be. But the point is, you got to learn these lessons other people are tripping on, see what things you have to be worried about, and build a risk register, they call it. Like, think through what are the top 5 or 10 things that could bite us in this space. Yeah, I'm seeing that more and more often. I know there was an issue with was an airline a couple of weeks ago reporting their Chat GPT, their bot was making incorrect summaries of some policies. So this guy said, hey, your chatbot said I can get a full refund. I want my money back. But I would think it goes along kind of along the lines of with employees, you really want the idea of, and I work with a lot of a good number of smaller companies, empowering your staff, especially in the cyber space. I want to empower this chatbot. I want to empower my developer, Jonathan, to do his work. I'm going to set the guidelines. And if Jonathan or the chatbot's running in the space, you go crazy. If you're outside the space, we got to put the brakes on. We got to double check what's going on. So I would frankly deal with a model like that. Chat GPT can spit out the social media, but maybe the intern skins do it. Or maybe have another tool read it for, I don't know, inappropriate comments and whatnot. The tools like that start to pop up. But establish the guidelines once you understand the risks. throw the guidelines and let it work with those guidelines.
I'm glad you brought up customer support because that's another area I'm thinking about. A lot of people, the first thing they say to me is, I want to fire my customer support team, replace them with a chatbot. And I always say, have you ever had a positive experience with someone else's customer support chatbot?
Shit.
No one's ever said yes. And I say, when someone reaches out to customer support, they're usually already at least a little bit upset. So you're taking someone in a negative situation, you're putting a bot in place that's risky because sometimes it goes off track. And then I ask, here's my second question. Will you give the chatbot the ability to authorize a refund and to actually process a refund? No way. So that means whoever I'm talking to doesn't have the ability to solve my problem. So that's why everyone hates chatbots and customer support. And I always say, listen, you can put a chatbot in the sales process. That's fine because that's a happy person. You're building up rapport. If someone's already upset, because I used to work at a Fortune 50 company, and I know the reason they moved customer support to India was because 10% of people, when they hear an Indian accent, will hang up and they go, we did keep all that refund money. And I go, wow, that's dark. And I only found that out because my friend was head of one of those departments. He's like, yeah, it's crazy up here. So companies sometimes do strategies specifically to push people off. That's why the phone tree exists because people will hang up and it's always about saving money. But I always say, this is my thought. I want to hear yours that there's a balance between giving the customer a good experience and cutting costs as much as you can. And there's a risk when you get rid of customer support, then there's a risk of a bad thing happening on the other side of that, which is an unsatisfied customer. Instead of a refund, it turns into a chargeback, which is a different problem. And all these other things that can happen, which is the customer, by the time they get to you, they're a lot more upset. You, it's like saving pennies to lose dollars. What do you think about this part of the process that when you're making decision-making calculus, it's not always about saving money that I know it's not specifically a cybersecurity risk, but it is like a technological risk.
Well, I think it comes down to AI is a really neat tool and it can do a lot of things, maybe not well, but it certainly has a lot of capabilities. And I know companies are playing with seeing how they can best leverage it to improve their business, whether that's cost or efficiency or whatnot. But like any other technology, like cloud technology and all the wearables that came out recently and self-driving cars, is it the right tool for our problem? If you start with a tool and then try to slot a problem into it, you're going to be in trouble. What I think is like any other technology is, yeah, again, if you're looking for a problem to solve with your technology, you're in trouble. It's really, you need to know your problems ahead of time and then see if the technology is the right solution to the problem.
So I personally know of 7 or 8 ways to jailbreak any AI. So if you have any company data that's inside of your I can get it. And I'm not that's not even my area of expertise. I just happen to follow some cybersecurity people in that space. So one of the issues with AI, and there's a couple ways. For example, you can send it a picture that has data encoded and it will immediately break through. So that's just one way. I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to give everyone away all these crazy things. I don't cover these very often, but other people do. So just realizing that if you actually did, that's the reason you don't want to give the chatbot the power because it's just like you could socially engineer a person, you can socially engineer an AI,
Yeah.
which is a new attack vector that people haven't even thought about. When I teach people, I say before you start using the AI for that, I like to use AI for smaller stuff like organizing, like sorting. So there's a lot of studies that have shown employees spend a huge amount of time dealing with email every day. I use an AI to help me organize my email. Really simple, really small. It's run locally. There's another area of AI that's very interesting. People in information or knowledge businesses like mine spend 20% of our time looking for files. And I learned that last week. I was talking to someone last episode. I go, you're right. That is true. That's definitely true for me. So
Yeah.
an AI to help you sort and organize your files makes a lot of sense because it's not customer facing. It's internal. It doesn't need to have public access because it can be run locally onto your machine. And these are the areas where I always try to tell people to start rather before you jump in between you and customers or in between you and your bank or these other areas that are exciting. But there's always a risk with any technology that's touching the internet. I remember in the late 90s when I was working on larger companies that we had an intranet, which is no one inside the building could actually access the internet from the company computers. Those days seem to be gone. Like that was a really good security measure, which was there's a firewall, or you would have two computers, one which had the internet and one which didn't. That security measure seems to have faded away, and I'm not sure why, because it seems like it's probably the smartest version of this, right? Which is that our network is secure, so then we just have a team just protecting the fence. What do you think when people are thinking about implementing these technologies about these vulnerabilities that are the unexpected things? Because it's like the 10 biggest losses in Las Vegas were all things that no one had insurance for, right? Siegfried and Roy had insurance for the tiger attacking the crowd, but not attacking Siegfried and Roy. So they hadn't insured the one thing that happened. We all the things we expect, it's the unexpected, the black swan event. So how can someone prepare for these new areas when they haven't even thought of that? There's probably half people listening didn't even know you could jailbreak ChatGPT and have blown their minds on accident.
That's goes back to risk management. And in cases like this, I like to remind folks that, really what is risk? There's formulas out there. And if you ever do your cybersecurity training and certifications, they'll talk about different formulas. But the most fundamental is risk is impact. How big is the issue? What is the issue? And then divided by countermeasures. So what are your protections? The more protections, the less risk. The more vulnerabilities, the more risk, and the bigger impact, the more risk. Think about the impact aspect of that. So if you had a chat GPT, which was totally hacked, all the data is gone, but you had data you didn't care about, it's very low impact. So in this very quickly evolving world of AI, the vulnerabilities may be a big unknown because they're going to pop up all the time. The amount of protections you can apply is going to be evolving as well, but you can control the impact aspect, the piloting, the small scope data. We talked about classification data, using data that you classified as not really important in your pilots. Drive down the risk by using less risky data because you're right. There is an unknown area of this AI and how you're going to manage it. But I do want to step back to you mentioned earlier on the idea that where do you start? You got the office users and then you got public facing stuff and something else. I would intentionally break those into two pieces. It's relatively easy and it's consumerized these days of how to get AI to your office workers. Again, it's built into Office. There's a bunch of tools out there. Good or bad, you still have to play it, but that's really it's becoming clear how to manage that. You can jump on that immediately once you've again established your guidelines and your boundaries how to do it correctly. But I would make that distinct from consumer facing, which is much more business related sorts of application of AI. It again can be riskier because it may be public facing. Plus, it's typically less mature, perhaps, than consumer related AI. Your Copilot built in Office 365, Microsoft's been banging on it for a year, let's say, and they're pretty sound. If you have a public facing chatbot, it may not be as polished and as mature. So you don't have the maturity level behind that security solution. That's another reason your public facing stuff may be more risky just because it hasn't baked as long. And all the threat modeling and all the cybersecurity stuff you can do to drive down the risk is not as mature as it would be in a consumer facing solution.
So there's another vector I want to talk about. This is something that's specific to me is that people who are creatives, authors, artists, their response right now is there's a lot of people suing ChatGPT and suing Midjourney for stealing their data. And George R. R. Martin, for example, someone used ChatGPT to finish his series. They write the final two books of Fire of Dragon Ice. And I was like, that I thought that's a really good idea. And my feeling is you haven't written a book in 13 years, you're probably not going to finish the series. Like you probably stopped. The guy didn't sell it or publish it. He just wrote it for himself and I guess talked about it online. And so that's why they're suing ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT has read my book without permission. So if you say to ChatGPT, write in the style of Jonathan Green, it will write in my style, which surprised me because I'm about the fourth or fifth most famous Jonathan Green author. There's the guy who wrote A Fault in Our Stars. There's a science fiction author. There's a couple other ones, but it picked me. And I only found out when I was doing a live demo and I go, this won't sound like me, but watch this. And then it did. And I go, which Jonathan Green are you using? And so it's read my book. Why? Easy. It scans the internet. Every book ends up on a PDF on some Russian website. So it's probably how it ran into it. I doubt it stole it from Amazon servers because it doesn't need to. I look at this and I think, is that my secret sauce? Or is there more to me? And my mindset is I think about the Napster stuff 30 years ago when everyone sued Napster and said, no more internet music. That didn't work. The internet is where all music is now. Everyone's changed. No one buys CDs anymore. The business model had to adapt and change. The artists who switched and adapted the fastest really succeeded. There were certain musicians who would take their song, rename it as every popular song, and upload it to those servers so people would download it thinking it was the song they wanted, and it was Soldier Boy. That's how he got famous. I was like, "That's so genius." He just kept taking a song, he would name it "U2 This" or whatever band was popular, and people would download that, and it would just keep being Soldier Boy. And I know people, that's how they first heard of one of his songs. So there's people who are fighting against it, and people go, "I think there's an opportunity here to get my name out there." And when I think about my possibility, yes, my book is in there. The thought of getting them to pull it out, which I know would be almost impossible for them, they'd have to retrain the entire model. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars just for me. They would never do it. I don't want to be part of a class action lawsuit. And same thing like Hollywood writers are doing is that they think the answer is regulation or systems, like you can stop a technology, and that never works. So my thought was, I can use this. And I had this version edit my book, and I edited my book fast I've ever edited a book before. We did get into a lot of fights, and this is the reason I've never wanted a twin because it's like talking to yourself. It's like with my personality, I was like clashing with it, which is exactly what I expected to happen because we both have strong-willed personalities. With this new vector where people are thinking about my information, which is my special sauce, my writing style, my painting style, my drawing style is what makes me special. And now that's getting pulled into these AIs. What do you think people should do? Because my thought is that I'm more than just my style. I'm constantly innovating, constantly doing new things and thinking, how can I stay ahead of this curve? Because my data, my images constantly get pulled in there because I'm a public figure.
Yeah, that's a good thought. As you mentioned, as you wrapped up that story, you got me thinking about conversations we had about consumer identity theft. I was on a group that was giving some feedback to the FTC on some stuff they were doing. And we're talking about social security numbers. People are stealing these social security numbers. They're making a lot of money off it. It's a pain in the butt if you get it stolen. And it kind of occurred to me, like, why is the social security number so important? We spend so much time trying to stop people from stealing the social security number. On the back end, why don't we just stop the misuse of the social security number? You're not going to stop the stealing of Jonathan Green's book because you're right. It's going to be in Russia. They're going to publish it. You're not going to steal anything that's publishable is going to get stolen. I don't think you can stop. You can't steal the theft unless you put real serious boundaries around it, which consumers aren't going to, it's going to stick. Foreseeable future, anything's digital, just assume it's stolen. The question is, how do you stop the misuse on the back end? And I think that has to be worked out. But from your point of view, again, assume it's gone, which you decide is, can you get value out of it? Can you reduce the risk? Can you reduce the impact? I think the forward looking people and companies are going to get a lot of value out of this because they're going to learn how to play the game, just like they adjusted to the internet. They adjusted to the cloud. There's always pivots in our culture, in our technology, in our business. How dynamic and how fluid are you as an individual or as a business? You got to pivot. It's just the way of the world is. The world is not static. It's going to change. Learn what's going on and figure out how to make the best out of it.
So the last question I want to ask you as we wind down, because this has been amazing and I don't want to take too much of your time, but I just had so many questions for you, is that right now, every company is suddenly getting advice from their board of directors, which says, hey, we need to do AI this
Mhm.
year. And then the CEO goes, what do you mean by AI? And they go, we don't know. We just know we want it, which is the last thing you want to hear. It's like the worst possible thing you hear from someone. I want something, but I don't know what it means. This happened about 25 years ago when every company said they needed a website. And you'd say, why do you need a website? They go, I don't know. I just know I need one. And it was like my nephew told me I needed one. My cousin told me I needed one, the board of directors. And first it was a MySpace page, then it was my own website, then it was a Facebook page, and then it was a mobile version of your website, and now it's every company needs AI, and they're not sure what it means. So there's this massive demand in the market for AI expertise, the area that I'm in, where I tell people what to do and what not to, what's possible and not possible. 90% of my job is telling people what tools not to use, or that tool's not AI. That's most of what I do is what I keep out, not what I keep in. It's what I don't recommend because there's a lot more stuff I don't recommend than I do. There's this need, and everyone's talking about the development of the chief AI officer. A lot of companies are talking about it, and the salaries just because there's so few people in that space, crazy spiking. And then when you say, what does a chief AI officer do? Nobody knows. When you say, what level of expertise? If you talk to a CTO, they think a chief AI officer should basically be a CTO under another name, right? A super technical person who's programming themselves. If you talk to people from other directions, especially people who come from the consulting world, they say, no, a chief AI officer's real job is to tell you which companies to work with and which to not. Their job is not to implement, but instead to develop strategy and then say, hire this agency, not that agency. That agency is what they're talking about. I went through an experience where a very large company reached out to me to have me look at their stuff and work on a project with them, and they forgot to send me the NDA and then canceled the project. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna talk about this all day long." And they were charging millions of dollars, and everything in their secret deck is in my book. I was like, "Guys, you don't have anything in here that you're charging 100 times more than I do that's different, unique, or whatever." As I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna learn all these amazing things. They're spending millions of dollars on R&D. They must know more about AI than I do." And no, they just charge at that level. So, what do you think the future is for that space? As someone who works in the fractional space, as someone who works with a lot of other people in your organization that are different types of fractional experts, what do you think is going to happen? And how is this idea of the fractional AIO going to shake out? And what do you think this role fills that's different than a COO and a CTO? Because it's, I think, in between those two roles. That's where I think it fits in my mind, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So I've worked in healthcare for a good bit of my career. And over the past 10 years or so, a lot of big healthcare organizations have created positions called the chief data analytics officer. So healthcare has lots and lots of data and they're trying to figure out how to make the most value out of it. The data analytics officer and the AI officer, those are pretty similar roles. And really the idea is how do we as a business best leverage this technology to solve our business problems and continue to execute upon our mission statements. And that's what that executive C-level suite is supposed to do is set strategy, a lot of alignment, a lot of culture working with the organization to make sure that we agree on what we're doing and heading in the right direction, overseeing a roadmaps, those sorts of things. I definitely would not have the AI officer play in the CTO space. The CTO has a very specific job, architecting, building things, and making it all work together. That's your CTO. You don't want two guys or gals fighting in that space because someone's got to own how all the pieces fit together. The CIO operates it all, makes sure it works, makes sure it aligns with the business need. But frankly, I think the chief AI officer is something that'll spike and then probably disappear in 10 years because it's just going to get absorbed into general data management, the CIO strategy sorts of stuff. So I think it's going to spike because it's a lot of interest and there's a big rush. And again, everyone wants to be ahead of the curve, like we talked about, but it's going to normalize this to become part of a general business function, data management. So your CIO or maybe a chief data officer sort of position. Now, the advantage of the fractionals is the fractional that you can bring in someone who's got that experience. So if you're a mid-sized company, you don't want to spend 500 grand on a AI officer or more. There's people out there that have that experience doing it. I've been a fractional executive for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was actually a VP of cybersecurity for a couple of big companies across the US. So a real fractional executive, and there's real fractional executives, and there's people that call themselves fractionals. And in my mind, the difference is do you actually have executive experience? So people that can act like an executive, give you the strategy, give you the roadmap, give you the alignment, those sorts of things. I would think that would be a great way to spend your money is get those fractionals with the experience in the AI space, the experience as an executive and kind of help you. Maybe you can learn lessons from previous clients. You're having that experience, especially in such a quick moving dynamic space like AI would be invaluable. So that would be a great use case for the executive role, fractional executive role.
Because a lot of the CTOs I talk to or fractional CTOs are trying to slide over. And the same thing with a lot of programmers. A ton of programmers in the last year have changed their profile from programmer to AI engineer or prompt engineer. And the problem with the programmer is that every nail needs a hammer. And their answer to everything is custom software, custom code. And I always tell people, I say, listen, the last thing you want to do right now when the technology is moving this fast is build custom code, because you build something custom and it's going to be on the API. By the time you finish, it's 3 months or 6 months ago, they update it. For example, if you built something on Midjourney's API, they made an announcement 3 weeks ago. They go, hey, everything in the past no longer works. We've restructured our entire prompting language, which means everything you spent 6 months building no longer works. And I had a small tool I built, went through that problem. And that's exactly why I think the chief AI officers is exactly that, is more implementation, is figure out which tools to use, which tools not to use, developing the strategy, not the technical thing of building your own software. Because why would you do that when companies are spending hundreds of $1 millions and adapting so fast that by the time you finish something, the tools have changed? Like right now, this week, Claude is the better tool, but as soon as ChatGPT releases their next iteration, then that will be the better tool. And then Anthropic releases a version, or maybe Google release a new version. And I just think that this idea, the older mindset of everything should be a custom solution. Anytime I built a custom solution, I've always regretted it later on. It hasn't been necessary for my business. And then I go, there's a solution that's 99% as good that's already publicly available that doesn't require me to maintain and update it, because that's another additional stress on your business. You have to have an AI engineer. And a lot of people claim to be really experts at AI programming, or like that part of it, building an AI. And it's like, how is that possible? They've only been around for a year and a half at this level. Anything before that was really machine learning. So I that's my thought. I just wanted to get your thought on that perspective, see if I'm in the right direction or if I'm crazy.
I do think you bring up a good point is it's hard to know who knows AI, whether you're a strategic AI person or a developer or whatever, or an integrator or whatever it may be. Again, things moving so quickly. And again, I think that's where your chief AI officer can work with perhaps with HR to identify how do we detect the right people, the right skill set to work in this space. Yeah, resources are going to be a problem. If you want to push ahead and you want to be leading edge in AI or anything, finding the right resources to support that is not easy. And it's not cheap. Not cheap either. That's a great point. You got to make sure you find the right people.
That's been amazing. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I have really enjoyed this. Where can people find out more about you? Do you want them to follow you on LinkedIn, visit your website? Where's the best place for people to connect with you and find out all the things you're working on, and see if maybe you're the right fractional person to help them take their business to the next level and protect their security issues?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Really, you can find me my company. I'm a partner with Tech CXO. It's TECHCXO. Look up Terry or look up security. You'll find me in that space. We're a large consulting group, about 100 fractional executives. So cybersecurity, technology, AI. We have quite a stable of executives in there. So yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me. Happy to chat with anyone.
Thank you so much for being here. I'll put all the links below the videos and in the show notes. And thank you guys for listening to another amazing episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Starting with AI can be scary. ChatGPT Profits is not only a bestseller, but also the missing instruction manual to make mastering ChatGPT a breeze. Bypass the hard stuff and get straight to success with ChatGPT Profits. As always, I would love for you to support the show by paying full price on Amazon. But you can get it absolutely free for a limited time at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next Monday with more tips and tactics on how to leverage AI to escape that rat race. Head over to artificialintelligencepod.com now to see past episodes, leave a review, and check out all of our socials.